Our next guest is Mike Figliuolo, and he's a frequent columnist in Quality Digest, well-read columnist in our Quality Digest Daily. He has recently co-authored a book with Victor Prince titled "Lead Inside the Box: How Smart Leaders Guide Their Teams to Exceptional Results." And in their book, the authors seek to provide leaders a method to get the most out of their teams by better focusing their leadership efforts and tailoring their approach to the unique needs of each individual team member. So Mike, thanks for joining us. Mike is with us via Skype.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hey, sure. So Mike, in the preface to your book, you write that one of the biggest challenges leaders face is determining where to expend their limited time, focus, and energy. All too often, you write, they spend a great deal of that leadership capital on people development efforts that yield limited results. And yet, your method wants leaders to tailor their leadership to the unique needs of each team member. And to me, that sounds really time-consuming. So can you explain what you're talking about there?
Yeah, it's actually quite easy when you think about it, because we spend a lot of time thinking about budgeting our financial capital and how we're going to spend it, but very little time thinking about how we're going to spend the most valuable resource, which is our time. And the construct, the box that we refer to as the leadership matrix, and you have to look at who needs your time. Too many times we get lazy and say, well, I have 5 team members and I'll give everybody 2 hours a week because that's fair and I'll just spread it evenly. The problem is you have Joe, who's a high performer, and Joe only needs 30 minutes of your time. And the other hour and a half is a complete waste. And it's actually frustrating to Joe because he's a high performer. And then you have Frank, who's a low performer, and you give him 2 hours of your time, but he needs 4 because he needs coaching and training and mentoring from you. So what we're really advocating is just being more mindful about the situations that these individuals are in, and how you spend your time with them is a deliberate investment of that to get better results.
Okay, so actually you kind of led into my next question here a little bit. In your book, you talk about 4 employee types. The exemplars, those are your outstanding performers. The high cost producers, which I read, they produce but with a lot of energy invested into them. The passengers, who sounds like are just along for the ride, and the detractors. So which of these type of people would you say are the hardest to deal with?
You know, I think for me, every leader is going to deal with them differently. And some people would argue exemplars are harder. Some would say detractors are harder. For me, the ones that I have the most difficulty with are the passengers, because you're not getting a lot out of them and they are just along for the ride. And it's inherently a motivational issue. So how do you find that motivation for them to get them contributing to the organization? And that can be a pretty sticky wicket.
Okay, well, let's like you said, I would have thought it would have been the detractor, and the detractor, as kind of as you described it, is a person who maybe is in the wrong position because of their lack of skills. They don't have the skill set required for the position they're talking about. Do I kind of understand that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you indicate, or you say that it's a skills issue, but to me it also seems like you have a case sometimes where the personality doesn't fit the job. It's not necessarily a skills thing, but I don't know, I guess maybe an extreme example might be, trying to make an extreme introvert into a salesperson, which requires, I would think, more of an extrovert. So, I mean, is there really a case where the detractors are simply people who are in the wrong job, not for lack of skills?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But by definition, if they don't have the skills to do that job, they're in the wrong role, right? So we're saying the same thing, and it's really, you're going to use the same strategy to get them to improve. So you either upskill them and get them the training and capabilities they need, or you redefine their role and put them somewhere else in the organization where they can be a higher performer.
And Mike, do you feel that, like if you had 2 managers in 2 different companies, very similar in their age, experience, skills, and yet in one company they've inherited a certain team. They have, either through union requirements or governmental regulations or tenure or whatever, they can't really make any changes so much. There's a limitation of how much pressure they can put on to change behavior, as you were talking about the sticky wicket ago. And then there's this other company right next door, and you could essentially replace half of the team, and when I say replace, I don't necessarily mean fire, but transfer to other areas and so on. How do you deal with that sort of difference in latitude or leeway in what they're able to do?
I think it boils down to creativity, and there are those limitations. If you're not allowed to put people on performance improvement plans or change their job descriptions or change their incentives, obviously you have a lot fewer options in front of you in terms of changing performance. But that said, it doesn't give you a free pass to just say, oh, well, forget it, my hands are tied, right? There are always opportunities to try and improve performance, and it's really, how well do you understand the individual and their personal goals? What do they want for their career? Are there ways that you could reallocate work to different people or pair different people up? Sometimes it's a coworker issue, and Frank is performing poorly because he's working with Joe and he hates Joe. And if you have him work with Susan, right, same responsibilities, but you're creating a different environment. So I think in any of those situations, a leader has the opportunity to improve performance. It's just a lot tougher in the first situation.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And you know what also, as I was reading through your material, that it sort of surprised me as I was reading this, I thought this applies to looking at your superiors, at least the way I was interpreting it, as much as it does to your subordinates. I have worked for guys that you described them perfectly, and they were my bosses.
Yep. And the funny thing is, people are reading this, and the first place they start is, oh, I'm going to look at my team. And then they have the self-awareness to say, wait, which of these boxes am I in personally? Yeah. And by the way, I've inhabited every single one of these quadrants. I've been a detractor, I've been a high performer, exemplar, and it's really a function of the situation I'm in. And you're right, it applies to your leaders as well. So can you take these same lessons and think through how are you going to interact with that leader to get the most out of them in terms of them helping you develop and grow?
And I remember one of my professors talking about Maslow's classic hierarchy and how you can run up and down that scale of 5 levels inside of literally a second or two in terms of your emotional state. Would you say that you can also move quickly between those 4 quadrants? I mean, within a matter of just minutes or seconds?
I don't think it's minutes or seconds. I think it's project dependent, manager dependent. My example was I was on one project, loved my manager, was doing great work. I was an exemplar. Went on another project and the manager and I did not get along, and I started mailing it in. It was like, forget it, I don't care. And I went from exemplar to detractor. And then I got the feedback and I said, I got to change. And my next manager was great. And she was really dedicated to my development. And I was an exemplar again. And that was over the period of about 3 months that I made those moves.
Okay.
And Mike, what is, just to finish up here, what has been your biggest challenge in a leadership role? I mean, just speaking from personal experience, what has been the biggest problem for you?
So right now, running my firm, I have all exemplars. It's beautiful because I get to choose who's on the team, but it's an incredible challenge to let go, right? It's my firm. It's the way I do things, but I have these incredibly bright people and I can't stifle them and say, here's how you have to do it. So for me as a leader to say, you know what, I hired well and I got to let them run is very uncomfortable. And there's been a lot of growth for me in doing that, but the results have been outstanding.
Okay, well, Mike, hey, thanks for joining us. If you're interested in Mike's book, if we can throw up there on the screen again, the link is in the player page. Underneath the player, you can find Mike's book. You can link out to it, Lead Inside the Box. You can also go to their website, www.leadinsidethebox.com. It's also available on Amazon for sale, so go check it out. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you for having me. Thanks.
Great. Okay, and finally today,